Welcome to Puddlecast, where we discuss safety, water, environment, and career development topics. Let's jump in.
All right. Welcome, everybody, to our Puddlecast here. I got my buddy Damon. He drove all the way up here from Oregon today. Appreciate you being here.
Happy to be here, Nate.
All right.
Happy to be here.
We're going to talk a little bit about, I want to talk to everybody about hydromulch, and I want to talk about how we consider that on part of our projects and what needs to go into the planning and decision making of making this a BMP that's going to be effective for us going forward. So, well, first, right, not everybody calls it hydroseed, right? But
they do.
That's not necessarily what it is. It's more than that, right? So talk to me about how the different types that are out there, the different applications that are available.
Yeah, great question. A lot of technology in there in that space that you don't even imagine. I mean, you see the green stuff on the side of the highway, and it all looks the same, right? Well, we go from basic mulches that would be great for seed in your backyard all the way up to products that are used for mine reclamation on, one-to-one slope on terrible soils at high altitude where things are going to establish very slowly. But erosion and vegetation is a concern. So yeah, a lot of stuff going on there.
Yeah, and a lot of these technologies, right? It's about when you're choosing the right type of mulch. It's a lot of it has to do with how long it takes for the seed to germinate, and some of these you're putting down without any seed in them, right? I mean, you're more like an erosion control blanket.
Yeah, you can use them just for stabilization and not have to worry about vegetating things. So yeah, there's a lot of variables in there, and it all depends on what you're trying to achieve on which one you select. So
yeah, so doing my backyard, I'm going to just be putting something down that sort of shows me where I'm painting the ground. But if I'm trying to protect a slope, what are the other considerations that I need to have in choosing a mulch that's going to stay and work?
Well, you've got to manage your risk, right? You've got to decide, can I potentially lose some soil off the slope, or do I need to make sure everything stays in place? We have a salmon stream next door, or is it a cow pasture? And do we have water coming over the top? Well, that's a whole different issue right there. A lot of different things we got to look at and decide how much protection I need, how long I need it to last. What are we installing? Are we putting in native seeds? They're gonna take a year to germinate and establish. Are we seeding in the fall and we don't have any growth that we're going to anticipate until next spring? Or are we seeding in the spring and things are going to come up fairly quickly? So longevity is important. How much water these things hold is important. There's a lot of considerations that we get to look at when we're choosing them.
Yeah, and one of those influences, right, is, seed cost is one thing when you're trying to just use a DOT specified seed on the shoulder of the road or whatever, but when you're getting into like native seeds, or people have been out there 6 months ahead of the project and picking seed heads off of the vegetation to put it back in the seed truck, that's changing that seed cost, and you're wanting to have an insurance policy that's protecting that, right?
Exactly. You don't want to do a project more than once, right? Maybe if you've got erosion issues, you got to get equipment back in there. Not going to happen in most places, right? You're working your way out of that project. You need to make sure you're buttoned up. And yeah, native seeds can be super expensive, and you kind of want to add some insurance when you're doing that. So, you go with the higher end product, and it may seem expensive on the front end, but what's the life cycle cost, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Life cycle cost is huge, right?
Yeah.
It all costs you something to purchase, but then there's the installation, maintenance, and potentially, throwing it away or whatever you got to do on the backside of having it. And not just being impulsive or making decisions based on what something costs up front is important in your decision making.
Exactly. And you got to, again, back to that soil, right? Is that soil going to support vegetation? Do we need to modify it somehow? Do we need amendments in there? There's other options out there. We can get that soil into the place where it can grow things without the expense of topsoil or compost. We can use biotic soil medias, for instance, or we can identify the fact that this soil is not going to grow anything. We need to know that, right? If we're going to spend a lot of money on seed and installation, we need to know if it's actually got potential to vegetate.
Well, and I think that's something that some people don't understand, is that the bag doesn't necessarily have everything in it that's necessary to get that seed to grow. So it's like making a recipe, right? It's like you've got the seed. The seed takes this. It needs this stuff to be able to establish, and you're making that recipe within that truck to be sprayed out onto the site.
Correct. And that's the thing, like you said, a lot of people don't understand. The mulches in those big 50-pound bags are sterile. They do not have any seed. They do not have any nutrient value. I mean, there's nothing we're adding to that. But you can mix that in the tank. So think of making a cake, and you're putting that final frosting on it, right? So you've got the slope built. You've got that cake made. And now you're going to just finish it off, and you're going to make it look as good as you can. And that vegetation is what that end goal is. That's what we decide what goes in that tank. Again, back to that soil test. What's deficient? How do we get us closer to vegetation faster? And we add that to the tank. We put it on. We paint it on. And boom, the cake's frosted. And, now it's up to Mother Nature and the weather and everything else to get that established. But you've managed your risk. You've got things under control. You've done everything you can to give that vegetation a jump start to get going. And
so a lot of when we're planning this out and we're trying to put all these pieces together, a lot of times, like, how important is doing a soil test? How important is knowing what you're getting into, what you're getting involved with at the beginning?
Very important. Soil test is a very inexpensive, insurance expense. You get to know what's there. And there may be some very easy modifications you can do to establish vegetation faster. And just looking at soil, you can't tell if it's going to grow vegetation or not. You may have a lot of experience in your area, but if you've imported soil or you've scraped off the topsoil and you're working with a subsoil, there's just a lot of things that come into play. pH, often overlooked, right? pH allows, in the sweet spot of pH, 6.3 to 7.3, the nutrients that you put on, the nutrients that are in that soil are available to the plants. You get beyond that range on either end, and those nutrients are not available to plants. So they can't use it to grow and thrive and put the roots down and become that sustainable vegetation that we're after. And that's just one of the factors that we look at.
So imagine we have a 3-to-1, 300-foot long slope. I go and you're talking to me about, maybe Flexterra or something that's one of your higher end products or whatever you've got out there. And you tell me that the application rate is going to be some cost per square foot. And I look at that and I go, oh, I don't know about that for my budget. I don't know about if that's going to work. How do we look at the slope different? Or what are other things that can influence the cost? Now, right, there's a balance between all of this. But like you said, making this cake, they all look like cakes when they're done, but it's the ingredients that matters. And a lot of times it has to do with the prep work in getting that establishment. So take me through a process of looking at a 3-to-1, 300-foot long slope and making a determination about how we're going to make this cake.
How we're going to select. Well, we're going to figure out where we're doing it.
Yeah.
Where's cake getting baked? Is it altitude? And are we establishing native seed? Are we establishing agronomic seed? Agronomic seed comes up much faster. It's got a big seed pod. It's got a lot of carbohydrates in there. It grows that vegetation fast. Native seed is thin and lean, and it's built to persist. So it's going to be there in a couple of years. So we've got to manage our timeline on that and understand what protection we need on that slope. We need to know what those soils are like. We need to know how much rainfall we're going to get. Are we going to, do we have to deal with some real flashy events that demand a lot of protection, or is it going to be a very soft, gentle rain typically that doesn't demand a ton of protection? Is our soil sandy? Is our soil silty? How do we, how much exposure do we have on that project?
And to be more successful, or if, let's say I want to try a different mulch, I would need to potentially add different BMPs, or I'm going to have to do some slope preparation to get the same experience that I'm going to have with maybe some of the higher. You do the the good, better, best model, right? Let's say I want to take you told me what the best is, and then I go, okay, well, is there a good alternative? And then you might say, okay, well, it's going to do that, but we have to do these things to make it act or behave like this other one.
Yeah, so if we walked from Flexdera down to Pro Matrix on a 300-foot long 3-to-1 slope, 3-to-1's not too bad, but 300 feet long is. So we got to make sure we break that slope up, right? We've got to put slope protection devices in there, wattles, Excelsior logs, something like that to slow down the waters that comes down that hill.
We're trying to take some of that shear stress out of the face of it,
Correct.
right?
Correct. Yeah. So you got to take the energy out of that water as it flows down the hill. And then we need to make sure that we get the proper application rate, very dependent on that slope. That's what provides the protection that shows up on that data sheet that we tell you, this is going to give you a C factor of 0.05. That's how we determine that. And it's the application rate is critical to that.
Yeah. That's awesome. So I need to do this project, right? And we've got, I'm going to hire somebody to come out and do this stuff, and they've maybe used your material before, but what do they need? Like, how do I make the call to an applicator and make sure that I'm providing them everything that they need to do the work?
How can you be the best partner for them?
There you go. Thanks.
Yeah. How can you be the best date?
Yeah.
You got to tell them what they're going to expect, right? Okay, so you've got access to the top and bottom of this slope. You don't have to pull a hose 400 feet. You only got to pull it 200 feet. You've got a water source nearby, so we've got to fill up that hydroseeder with something, right? And the further away that water is, the more expensive your application is going to be. So if you can provide something close, that's going to be a benefit.
We don't want them leaving. In other words, like we got on their schedule.
Yep,
we got to apply, and we don't want them to come back.
And if you're doing it in the fall, they've got 400 other people that want to date them.
Yeah.
And super important that you're their best date, right? So they got to know how much area you've got ready to treat, because they're going to show up with the right product and the right amount of product to treat the area you've got. If you say you've got it all ready and they show up and they've only got half of it ready, they're not going to be happy and you're going to fall down that list. If you've got twice as much ready as you told them, they're not going to have the product and you're going to fall down their list because they've got to make sure that product gets out there.
Right. So, and talk to me about the seasonality too, and the importance of maybe ordering your product early and staging it or whatever that is, because it seems like this, along with a lot of other things in the stormwater world, we're all reaching into the same resource pool at the same time of year. And so making sure that we're getting everything lined up ahead of time oftentimes makes us more successful than reactionary.
It does. And there's a timeline to everything, right? And when we have that big bubble at the end of the season, everybody wants it. And so we got to make sure that you've got things in the process, in the pipeline, the product coming, the seed tied up. I mean, there's just a lot of parts that go into this that you need to make sure get arranged in a timely manner. It's okay if you've got it ahead of time; it can wait. But if you don't have it on time, and that rainfall's coming and the inspector is down your neck, you're going to be scrambling, and it's not going to be fun, and nobody needs that kind of stress. Jobs are stressful enough. Take something out of that stress level.
Are there any concerns about on-site staging? Like, is there anything that we need to do with the product to make sure it doesn't change or anything?
It comes wrapped in weather-tight wrapping. You should be all fine.
Okay.
There's really no issue. Just make sure the truck driver doesn't flip it over and nobody drives over it.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's in good shape.
And so how do we know how much of it to order? Like how in the staging process, like I got to get a footprint, how many bales I'm going to put in this area. How do I make that decision?
Yeah, so you've got to have a good measurement, right? You've got an accurate on-ground measurement of what's ready, and be sure to incorporate into that. If we're looking at a two-dimensional view of your site, we need to make sure that we make a modification for how much slope we've got, because that slope makes that whole piece longer, right? If you've got a flat area, pretty easy to measure out. But if you've got a slope, you've got to make sure you've got exact dimensions of that. And then you add some cat tracking, which you really want on a slope. So you've got some places for that water to slow down and penetrate. That adds even more area to it. So 10, 15% even. So maybe have a little bit extra. Be safe on that side of it, but don't be short. That's really the key.
Okay. talk to me about some of the application experiences you've had in the past, and talk to me about like what it's like to do things in arid climates versus, really maybe out on the coast where you've got a lot of moisture all the time. And what are the challenges in applications for dry versus wet applications?
Yeah, so you've got to manage your expectations for one. But a dry site, we get into problems with product rolling, right? If we've got that dusty soil that has been driven over a million times and it looks like talcum powder, it can be a real beast to try to get product to stay on top of that. It tends to roll into it. You still have your application over that whole area and the seeds down in there, but you don't have that top protection. So pre-wetting that can help. Typically doesn't happen. It can just be a challenge. Just be aware that area may need another application once we get some moisture. You go to the coast and we've got, someplace where we're in the rainy season, say. Mm-hmm. We've got issues where things are, it's raining every day. How do we grab that time to get on that site and deal with the application? Well, different products have different cure times. FlexTerra cures upon installation, so it provides that protection immediately. That doesn't mean that we can put it down when we're getting 2 inches of rain. Yeah. I've seen that happen. It just dilutes it and floats it away. Doesn't do any good. I don't know what would work well in that, but none of the hydraulics will do that. They've got a water carrier. We've got to grab that dry day. We want to make sure we're not applying over moisture, over standing water. We're not going to get that seed soil penetration that we need, or that intimate contact. There's a lot of considerations. We can deal with some semi-saturated soils, but if the water's standing on top, probably not the best day to apply.
And how do you add? So what if the material doesn't want to tack to the soil real well, or the soil doesn't have in it what's necessary to establish the vegetation? There's the mulch, which in my mind I always consider that as sort of the blanket, and sometimes it can add seed in it and sometimes it doesn't, right? I'm going to use it as a blanket, but how do I get a base that I have a high degree of success in is going to hold that blanket in place and or give a good establishment for that seed?
Yeah, so think of your garden at home, right? When you get ready to install it, plant it in the springtime, you go through and you till it up and you rake it in, you make sure it's a little compacted but not too compacted, and that's a perfect seed bed, right? Mm-hmm. So whenever we can achieve that on a project, we're money ahead. If we've got hard compacted slopes, we're going to have some issues. If we've got stuff that's too fluffy, we're going to have some issues. You're going to get, the hydraulic erosion control products, the mulch goes in with a lot of water, and you get some things washing away. It's going to take that applicator a little more art to get it to stay there. And they can do it, but it takes a little more finesse. Mm. So, that seed bed preparation is really important. And, it doesn't always happen. You've got a muddy site. They're going to say, just deal with that over there. Make it green. Mm-hmm. and perhaps that's the trade-off, right? We've got erosion control, but it's not a perfect place for vegetation.
Yeah. Well, what you just said there was interesting. The make it green, as I'm sitting in more meetings and we're hearing more architects and engineers talk about going from a grayscape to a greenscape, and we're starting to add like structural engineering with vegetation. How does hydromulch play into that, or what are things that can help like retain a hillside that used to be a concrete face, or it used to be hard rock? Now we can get this thing vegetated because it's green and we feel good about ourselves when we do it. But how do we hold it there?
How do we hold it there? You got to make sure you've got the right C factor on your mulch. So FlexTerra's got a C factor of 0.01, actually a little bit lower than that. So it's almost perfect erosion control. So we can put that on a steep slope. If that substrate will grow vegetation, we can maintain that seed on there and keep things in place.
And you use some of that, you infill with other materials though, right? As well, like other blankets that are going out or things like that, where you're doing long-term structural engineering and you're infilling it with material.
Right. Yep. So there's, I see where we're going now. Yeah, thank
It
you.
took me a little bit to get you there, but we're
sometimes you got to
working
spell
on it.
these things out. Yeah. If you've got a slope that maybe isn't super stable, or you've got maybe some rock in there that you got to keep in place, or you've got some channelized flows, we can use what's called in the industry a turf reinforcement mat. And our Futera matting is it's 95% open space. And what we do is we prep that slope nice and smooth, unlike everything else we do with the hydroseeding, because we want that intimate contact with the blanket. We put that blanket down, we anchor it in, and that can be anything from a 6-inch sod staple up to a 3-foot long aircraft cable percussion driven earth anchor. Depending on what the
soil,
substrate
right? Yeah.
is. So, that's dependent. And then we infill that, and we can infill that with either Flexterra in the seed, or we can use Proganics Dual in the seed. The Flexterra version we call Green Armor. The Dual version we call Brown Armor.
Okay.
And that,
Brown,
like that.
it's because people are freaking out when that stuff goes out and it's not green. It's like, where's my hydroseed?
That's right. And it provides that erosion control protection as well, but it holds that seed in place and provides that base of organic matter and other mycorrhizae and bacteria that really get that food web going and can grow grass on some pretty deficient soils. Not concrete, but pretty deficient soils.
Well, we're seeing just a lot of that being applied in whether they're doing side channels of rivers or edges of detention ponds or retaining walls or whatever. We're starting to see a real shift towards that.
Yeah, it's a good alternative to bringing in riprap.
Yeah.
And, it doesn't have, although it is a man-made product, it's a permanent installation, so it's not going anywhere. It doesn't break down very, very rapidly at all. And it replaces that carbon footprint of bringing in rock and placing rock and over-excavate, feeding that rock in.
And we're not managing graffiti art.
Exactly. We're not managing graffiti, and we've got vegetation that can be managed.
Yeah.
We're not trapping trash, where there's a lot of benefits.
Yeah.
A lot of
absolutely.
benefits.
Yeah. Well, I mean, out of all the things that we do in the erosion control world, I would say probably the industry that you're in part of is one of the more technologically advancing ones, right? We're doing amazing feats of engineering from a construction standpoint. They're an absolute nightmare from an erosion control standpoint, right? Hanging houses over cliffs and earthquake zones and building in floodplains. And so we're trying to find more effective and efficient ways of doing this erosion control. And when we're getting more and more remote, like I think one of the things that I learned a lot about the oil and gas industry was that, like, if you don't have it in your truck, you don't have it, because it took you 4 hours to get out to that spot, right? And so we're trying to find more economical ways of doing this, and I think these spray applied, hydraulically applied products provide a lot of those benefits.
Yeah, and we're maintaining our innovation and getting very creative with some solutions. You'll see some stuff coming out in the next few years that will move the dial even further now. So,
that's awesome.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Damon, thank you for coming and sharing some time and doing some puddle talk around here. This is great. Thank you, and we'll see you all next time.
Thank you to today's special guest. Join us again on the next Puddlecast.